All right. So I'm still wanting to do my requested video on parenting, but I think that's going to be a long one, so I'll just talk randomly for this one. So I wanted to talk a bit about what awakening is like and what kind of effects awakening has on life. So for example, subject of happiness, contentment, suffering. So we're all looking for happiness, and we're all looking to avoid suffering, but awakening is so much more than that. I mean, initially we get into our spiritual practice because we want to be happier, we want to be in pain, emotional pain less, we don't want to suffer. We want to get rid of this feeling of constant existential discontent. But eventually we realised that awakening is these are all kind of we become grateful for the suffering. We become, in a strange way, we become grateful for our past experiences and the evolution of the personal self. We have a newfound appreciation and love for it. And at a certain stage, that need to reduce suffering, get rid of suffering, or attain happiness, we let go of that as well, and we see that there was another paradox there, and letting go of that desire, we release ourselves from the suffering. Someone asked me, do I have emotional ups and downs, good days and bad days, bad moods and so on, and the answer to that is yes. Awakening doesn't make you perpetually happy for the rest of your life. It transcends that completely. It's kind of viewed now as just a sensation, like a biological sensation. There's no heavy meaning to it. There's like I said, the ego is still there, but after awakening, the ego it changes over time. It changes because it's not being reinforced constantly. It becomes less dense, and the emotional blockages come out, and we can relinquish a lot of this built up emotion that's inside the body, that's generally perpetuated by thought. So see the bad mood, and so when you think about happiness and sadness, they're two polarities of the same thing, two polarities of the same spectrum. And if you think about awakening as in take that whole spectrum, we're not just trying to move to one side, take that whole spectrum that includes all the variation between the two polarities, and you're basically you're transcending that whole thing. You're just tossing that into the void, into the infinite void. It becomes lost in it, but it's still part of it. It's a heavy police presence here. I don't know what's going on. So, and the ups and it's a very biological thing. The mood, the reaction, it's a very body biological thing. The body has these sensations, these reactions that are kind of in a way programmed into it, in order that it's learned in order to survive in this environment, in this ever-changing environment. So it's a mechanism. There's a reason for it. It's a process. There's no solid self there. There's no solid entity that all of this belongs to. Say there's a bad mood, irritable or whatever, a low mood, a kind of sadness still exists, but you can look at it from the angle of you know, when you've got a cold, right? You've got a cold virus, and it's but you're still getting on with your day and everything's fine. I'm not talking about like a horrendous flu that just annihilates you and you're stuck in bed. I mean, like a cold virus is there, but you're still totally functional, and you can still go about your day and have a laugh with your friends and get on with your work, and it's just there, and it's just there. It's kind of like that. It doesn't start to change your behaviour. It doesn't dictate. It doesn't reinforce a larger narrative. It's just there, and you can still be happy. And it's kind of paradoxical. You can still be happy whilst experiencing this low mood. The fluctuations are there, but they're seemingly very biological. The huge fluctuations that happened before, that seemed to depend on something, it seemed to depend on how we related to something as a self, aren't there anymore. And since the first awakening, or the first perceptual shift, I couldn't say that I didn't suffer. In fact, in a way, the suffering it became something else. It became more profound. It was like a clearing, like an emotional clearing in the body. But more recently, as this realization deepens, I can't say there's any suffering there at all. But it's still early days, but I can't say there's any suffering there at all. Or there hasn't been. But it's not the focus of my life. When you're focusing on trying to get rid of suffering, you almost create it, because you're resisting something. And that kind of resistance is where the suffering is. I'm still finding it very weird and difficult to attempt to talk about the more recent opening, the more recent realization and clarity, because it's almost as if everything becomes so airy and moves. It's like everything becomes so transparent, and I totally get what people mean when they refer to emptiness. I totally get that. When they refer to the awakening as the empty nature of things and life, but there's a total transcendence from all angles, moving through from all angles. There's no reference points, although all those reference points are still present. They're not recognized as real, and they don't have to be solid. Including the emotional ups and downs. Over time, after awakening and the continuing deepening of this process, yes, the self, our experience as a self in reality, it will begin to change. Our ego changes, our behaviour, our thoughts and actions will change, because the way we perceive reality has shifted so drastically. It seems to be quite a gradual process, and there's a very strong sense that I didn't choose this. I'm not a person who chose to take up a spiritual practice. It just so happened that I happened to be meditating, or the universe happened to be meditating through me, and it just all came about the way it did, almost by chance. And if there's any will there, or direction there, or choice there, it's the will of the universe. It entirely transcends this illusory self. We don't have the choice anyway. It's like when you sit down to meditate and you attempt to quiet the mind, that's not your choice. That's not in your control. The harder we fight it, the worse it gets. Almost. You're resisting. Let the thoughts come. It's almost like you're releasing them, and they come and they go, and the mind becomes more clear over time. But it's an illusion that we're in control of our thoughts. It really is an illusion. Thoughts are just there, just part of these sensations that make up our seeming reality, that we believe belong to us, this solid separate self, this solid entity. Until that illusion becomes opaque and transparent eventually. If that makes any sense. So a good practice I did with this was in meditation. If we focus on an object of meditation, let's say, we try and bring out, say in the visual field for example, we try and focus on the fine details of an object or a landscape or whatever, and as we focus on that fine point, we begin to expand our perception out the way to encompass more of this image that's in front of us without labelling it, without thoughts. And whenever the thoughts do appear, don't resist them, but whenever they do appear, we stop expanding our centre of awareness in our visual field, and we bring it back to the finest point possible, that dot of that pinpoint of awareness, and then we begin to let it expand. If the thought appears, bring it back in, and by doing this we can begin to see how our thinking mind limits our perception of reality. And we can see in a way that we are not in control of that thought. We are not deciding, right, I'm not thinking, I'm trying to not think. Can you see the problem with that approach? We're just letting, and say in the beginning, if you're sitting there and you're doing that, and every 5 seconds a thought comes, and you never expand out more than this much, then that's totally fine and it's great, and just continue with it. I found that to be a very helpful practice, which I'm not sure if I've talked about before. But you're exposing the automatic nature and the limiting nature of the mind, and it's exposing that and seeing the clarity that allows you to see through it. But in seeing through it, there's no separation, there's no resistance, no solidity, and no gap in perception. It's about closing that gap by making everything transparent in a way. And I really wish there was a way that I could describe this that seemed down to earth and totally relatable and simple. But it can't be done. I can't seem to be able to do it because attempting to use different languages and patterns of thinking to describe something, and it just seems to be all over the place and it never quite touches it. more clear things become, the more clear I can see that it's impossible to talk about, and I've said that a million times. It's went from difficult to describe to now impossible to talk about, so I can maybe update my channel name to I can see why people don't talk about this, how I think the Zen tradition is very much like that. We don't talk about it. Whereas I'm quite verbal, I like to talk, but we can also see that because it's not within our control, that we can really release that attempt to control. You can really release it mattering, because if it still matters, there's still identification there. It becomes so clear, it just becomes obvious, it becomes so clear. It really does, and the clarity can't be put into words, because words are kind of like muddy. Words are like muddying the water, clear water. And when the words disperse, then you can see the transparency, you can see through it. So if I was to give any advice about that, I would say release the need for it to matter. It doesn't matter. This longing pulls us. This pulls the separateness back into singularity. But the longing is there as a movement of the universe, and reuniting itself from separation as the natural movement of reality as it wants to move. It's just the way it's happening. Just flow with it, don't resist it, let it take you. It's almost like you don't try, it's like trying without trying. It's like, again, this is where I compare it to and I'm not sure many people have experienced the zone. If anyone's been a runner before, you get into this flow state, this zone, and it's so much like that, and you get into that state now and again, and then that state gradually takes over, lifts you along and takes you, and the whole universe is moving you. You're moving as and through the universe as part of it, as one effortless, beautiful movement, and there's no struggle in it. There's no resistance. I even think that it's possible for someone to be depressed and after awakening. Maybe it's not, I don't know, but from my understanding of things, it seems like that's how, and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. It would just be another sensation, another part of the experience. Biological happening, that because it's not part of the self, there isn't any suffering there. Maybe I'm wrong about that, I don't know, but I'm just trying to find ways to convey this transcendence and inclusion that I talk about, that's become so clear after the last deepening of realization. But in letting that go, you can just enjoy your practice. If you call it a practice, you can just enjoy it. You can just flow with it. There's no urgency there. There's no neediness there. There's everything's perfect. It's a perfect mess of experience, and that existential discontent is replaced with everything's just fine the way it is, and this has always been the way it is. and it goes beyond and sadness. It goes beyond all of that. Again, impossible to put into words. But anyway, that's 20 minutes. That'll do for now, and I'll see you next time.